Good afternoon, everyone. Today in the Children's Psychology Podcast, we will be examining how trauma can affect a child into adulthood and, as always, look at some real-life examples of that. Specifically, let's look at negligence in a child's life. A little background on childhood trauma to begin. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network volunteers some insight on how trauma, particularly negligence, impacts children. This resource gives a solid foundation on how different types of trauma affect kids and how they can respond. Negligence, for example, can make it difficult for children to form healthy relationships later in life, whether with parents, friends, or even in romantic partnerships. Neglected children also tend to struggle with expressing their emotions, often acting out aggressively because they haven't learned healthier ways to communicate. What's really eye-opening is how negligence can affect brain development. Without proper stimulation, a child's brain may not fully develop, leading to struggles with things like vocabulary and emotional expression. And it doesn't stop there. Trauma like this can have long-lasting physical effects too. Kids who experience negligence may develop chronic health issues like headaches because their nervous system didn't develop properly due to constant stress. In fact, childhood trauma can even shorten life expectancy and increase the risk of diseases like heart disease. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply early experiences shape our lives. Negligence is difficult to determine as parents, typically because they have different views on where to draw the line. For example, some people believe boredom is necessary in developmental years in order to develop ways to entertain yourself, but some parents are constantly stimulating their children with toys, playing, and television. On the topic of television, screens can be considered a huge form of negligence that people tend to normalize. For example, a baby could be crying or trying to show their parents something, but the parents don't notice and don't give their full attention because they're so addicted to screens. Parents also may turn to screens as a quick fix to occupy their kids, but studies show how overexposure to screens can significantly impact a child's emotional and cognitive development. This is a growing epidemic. Now, let's dive into one of the most severe cases of childhood trauma and negligence, the Menendez brothers. In the 1980s, these brothers, Lyle and Eric, were both extremely neglected by their mother, as she would allow such horrible things to happen to them. This negligence caused these brothers to suffer an incredible amount of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse from their father. Lyle and Eric's parents' absence regarding love and nurture made their homes filled with fear, confusion, and anxiety. As the brothers grew up, they suffered intense mental health issues, including depression, PTSD, and anxiety. Over time, their mental health was so awful that it ended up driving them to commit a horrifying act of violence against their parents. This shows that neglect and abuse can manifest in dangerous and unpredictable ways. Now, I have a guest speaker on the podcast, Julia Gruber. Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Let's dive right in. How old were you when your parents got divorced?
I was in 6th grade, so that makes me around 12 years old.
Okay, and what were some of those feelings you experienced while going through this?
I definitely felt like the first emotion that I had was guilt, because I thought it was my fault and that I thought the reason they were getting divorced was because of me and like my other siblings. I also felt over time neglected by my dad.
And negligence was one of those?
Yeah, you could say that.
Alright. And right now in your life, do you notice any difficulty in social settings?
Yeah, sometimes I find it hard to be able to communicate with others, especially when interacting with the whole family dynamic. It's hard to come from a broken family, especially not being able to speak to my father anymore.
Yeah. And what about when dealing with anger?
I can't deal with anger very well. I mean, it's hard enough to communicate my emotion, especially in regards to anger. I usually just end up crying or like not even being able to talk about it.
Alright, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I hope that was very useful for the viewers to see. In conclusion, negligence can take on many forms, from emotional and physical absence to the obsession of screens. While these acts may seem harmless, it can be detrimental for a child's mental and emotional development. This can cause children to view the world or themselves in a negative way that can affect them well into adulthood. If you're a parent, caregiver, teacher, or just someone constantly around children, I encourage you to be mindful during your interactions with these children because it can have lasting consequences. If you feel as though you have been a victim of childhood neglect, here is a number to call: 833-773-2445. Thank you for joining me today on the Children's Psychology Podcast. We hope this discussion helps bring more awareness to the importance of emotional presence and care in a child's life. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to explore more aspects of child development and the lasting effects of early experiences. Bye, everyone.